Pokemon Go is actually an exceptionally hard game to review. The problem with reviewing it is rooted in multiple causes, but the primary one is that it's unclear exactly how much of a game it even really is in the first place. While Pokemon Go definitely is a stellar example of gamification, calling it a game outright feels like a stretch on many occasions. Then there are other questions to consider. If one does consider it a game, does one assess it as a new Pokemon title? Doing so would ignore the context of its release and the platform that it's on completely after all. How about reviewing it as a standard bearer for mainstream AR technology? That sounds reasonable, but the AR in Pokemon Go is actually fairly banal, and sometimes even detrimental to the game experience. And if Pokemon Go is a game, what kind of game is it? Is it an MMO? Is it an exercise and fitness app? It's certainly not an RPG like traditional Pokemon games. And how in the world is one supposed to assess a game that, by the developer's own admission, will change alarmingly frequently, getting major features and fixes in fortnightly updates? The answer to all these questions: Pokemon Go is all of that and none of that. And depending on what you go into it expecting, you'll either find it exceptional and get addicted to it, or you'll find it mediocre and overhyped and then get addicted to it anyway. Pokemon Go doesn't warrant an explanation at this point, but let's give it one anyway. The game is basically an exploration of that intoxicating question that all of us in the Pokemon generation have asked ourselves at one point or the other. What if there were Pokemon in the real world? Using a combination of some admittedly cool augmented reality tech as well as geocaching, Pokemon Go strives to answer the question. It places you in our world, putting a custom trainer on a map based on Google Maps, and then begins to populate the world around you with Pokemon. To catch these Pokemon, you walk to them. In the real world, that is. Your real-world movement corresponds to in-game movement, and then you tap on them. This causes the game to switch to its AR mode, and the Pokemon you are battling appears on your phone screen, juxtaposed against your real-life surroundings. The sheer novelty of it can keep you playing for hours. If there is a Rattata in your bedroom, where would you find an Oddish? In your garden, perhaps? Where would you have to go to find a Pikachu? Why in the world is there a Grimer on your patio? The fact that Pokemon seem to have native habitats, prompting players to get out of the home and walk around with their phones if they want to find more of them, adds to the charm. Will there be a Bulbasaur in the park? A Spearow by the fountain? Pokemon Go gives you a reason to step out of the house and get some actual physical activity, and it does so by tempting you with the irresistible crying call which has defined a generation, which is, gotta catch 'em all. Just trying to find Pokemon and collecting them is a magical experience, and it's easy enough to be enamored by it so completely that you don't pay attention to anything else. But there is more to Pokemon Go than just hunting Pokemon in the real world. For instance, the game turns landmarks and locations around you into in-game places of interest. Fountains, statues, street art, schools, colleges, small businesses, and more can all be turned into Pokestops, which act as gathering points that hand out free supplies to trainers. And just trying to find a Pokestop can be an exercise in revelation as you explore your very own neighborhood with a fresh pair of eyes, and take it all in like you never have before. A lot of the joy in Pokemon has always been one of setting out on an adventure and exploring a grand world. In Pokemon Go, that adventure is set in the grandest world of all, your own. Pokemon Go's real power, and the reason the game went viral like it did, has more to do with how communal of an experience it is though. As you're walking around hunting Pokemon, you'll probably see someone else hunched over their smartphone screen, shuffling towards you what you know is a Pokestop in the distance. What a nerd, am I right? Jokes aside, instantly, you know that you're playing Pokemon Go, giving you a chance to connect with a stranger. Alternatively, you could go out hunting for Pokemon with friends, making the simple act of just walking around a kind of shared joy. You could try and take over gyms, larger points of interest in the real world, engaging in simplified battles and claiming them, and maybe eventually losing them to someone else. And even here, in an open competition, the game makes you engage in teamwork and cooperation, making the entire act of winning gym battles something you must do with one of the 3 teams you choose from and ally yourself with. Simply put, there's a lot in Pokemon Go, but there are also a lot of flaws and shortcomings which notably detract from the experience. The game's server issues are legendary at this point, and not in a Mewtwo kind of way. A week since its initial launch, these remain largely unresolved. To developer Niantic's credit, this is something they're actively working on to the extent that they've suspended the game's international rollout, but server disconnections happen all too often regardless. By themselves, they're inconvenient, but coupled with the game's generally buggy and glitchy nature, they actively hinder enjoyment of the title. Pokemon Go is probably the buggiest title to ever come out that was associated with Nintendo and not called Pikmin. The game is rife with random crashes and bugs where it outright stops responding, and sometimes this can interfere with you playing it at crucial moments. Considering you've finally thrown a Pokeball at a rare Pokemon like Scyther successfully, only to have the game hang right there, couple this with a server outage so the game can't even send the data of your capture to the host, meaning you have almost certainly lost that Scyther and must now try to find it again. Or consider fighting a gym battle and getting the other Pokemon all the way down to 1 HP, at which point its HP doesn't go down any further no matter what you do, causing it to attack you and knock you out, losing the gym battle in the process. These issues are actually outright game-breaking, and the fact that they aren't turning people away from the game is a testament more to the fundamental appeal of the game's underlying concept more than it is one to the game itself. There are other problems too, problems to do with the game's mechanics and content. Pokemon Go is a hugely simplified take on Pokemon. Just about all role-playing and story elements are taken out. All stats and team-building elements are also gone, reducing all Pokemon to just one greatly simplified stat, CP, which denotes their effectiveness in combat. There are no Pokemon battles with wild Pokemon, whom you simply ensnare in a simplified version of the Safari Zone mini-games from the mainline titles. Throw a Pokeball at it to try and catch it by swiping on the screen, or try and feed it berries to keep it around and keep it distracted long enough that you can snag it. Pokemon battles do exist in the game, but they're simplified affairs breaking down to 3 actions: swipe to dodge, tap to use your simple attack, and press to use your special attack. That's it. Your aim is to use these 3 actions to reduce the other Pokemon's HP down to 0. Just about everything else is simplified too. There are no levels for your Pokemon in the game, so evolution is handled by you catching multiple kinds of the same Pokemon to form a resource known as candy. Giving a Pokemon enough candies corresponding to its species evolves it, and candies can also alternatively be used to simply buff your Pokemon up by increasing their CP. There's no trading in the game, which is a shock, frankly, considering just how fundamental trading is to the very concept of Pokemon, though this at least is apparently being fast-tracked by Niantic for an update as soon as possible. There's no PvP in the game. Even the gym battles are asynchronous, meaning the joy of competition that Pokemon promotes is missing in this game too. For a game that's as social as Pokemon Go, it even lacks very basic communication tools in-game. All your interactions with other players must be face-to-face, which is great, don't get us wrong, but when we want to check in on a friend living on the other side of the planet also playing the game, this omission rankles. Really, there's so much wrong and so much missing, at some point it becomes clear that Pokemon Go definitely is not a very good Pokemon game, and it is a hugely mediocre game overall. As an AR experience, it's compelling because of the novelty, but the actual tech on use is primitive and simplistic. As an MMO, it's besought by so many server issues as to make the gameplay almost impossible. As a social experience, it lacks basic tools. But then you see your grandmother pick up her phone and step out of the house and aim the phone at a Pidgey and swipe at the screen to catch it. You see a 3-year-old kid, far too young to be able to play the mainline Pokemon games, squeal with joy at the magic of a Pikachu showing up in her bedroom, and you can see her eyes light up as she swipes at the screen to catch it. You see hundreds of people leaving their houses and stepping outside, walking. You see total strangers walking up to each other, talking, laughing, making conversation over this game. You see people who stopped caring for Pokemon or for Nintendo years ago suddenly pull out their smartphones and join in on the hunt again, as they are suddenly transported to 20 years ago all over again. You see people who've never really played video games, who are terrified of phones and technology, suddenly glancing at the screen that shows them these wonderful creatures hiding in the world all around them, and you see them make a swipe to catch those creatures. And then you realize, Pokemon Go may be a hugely mediocre game, however, it is an incredibly human experience, and at the heart of it all, that more than anything else defines it and the franchise that it's based on.
Like this video? Why not give us a like and subscribe? We try and upload amazing videos almost every single day. Thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you on the next one.